The rain came down like a wall that night, turning the mountain road into a river of mud and broken asphalt. Elias Ward gripped the steering wheel harder, squinting through the windshield as his wipers fought a losing battle. He shouldn't have been out there at all, not in this weather. But Mrs. Chen's medication wouldn't pick itself up from the pharmacy 2 towns over. That was just who Elias was, the kind of man who showed up when people needed him, even when it made no sense. He was thinking about Jonah, about whether his 12-year-old son had remembered to lock the back door, when he saw the car. It sat crooked in the ditch, passenger side crushed against a hillside, headlights flickering like a dying pulse. Elias pulled over without thinking, heart hammering. The rain soaked through his jacket before he'd taken 3 steps. When he reached the driver's side, he saw her, a woman slumped over the wheel, blood trailing from her temple, eyes closed. He yanked the door open and checked her pulse. Steady, thank God. He was reaching to unbuckle her seatbelt when the earth groaned behind him. Elias looked up just in time to see the hillside shift, rocks tumbling, mud sliding. He didn't think. He pulled her from the car, half carrying, half dragging her up the embankment as the landslide swallowed her vehicle whole. By the time he got her into his truck, his arms were shaking and his lungs burned, but she was breathing. That was enough. At home, Elias laid her on the couch and cleaned the wound on her forehead. It wasn't deep, but head injuries were tricky. Jonah stood in the doorway in his pajamas, eyes wide. Dad, who is she? I don't know, buddy, Elias said quietly, pressing a cloth to her temple. But she needed help. She woke an hour later, disoriented and pale. Her eyes darted around the small living room. The worn furniture, the photos of Jonah and his late mother on the mantel, the smell of coffee and motor oil that never quite left Elias's clothes. She sat up too fast and winced. Easy, Elias said, holding up a hand. You were in an accident. I'm Elias. You're safe. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Aurora, she said finally. Her voice was hoarse. Thank you. He nodded. You should see a doctor. I can drive you to... No, she said quickly. Too quickly. She softened her tone. I'm fine. Really. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek wallet. How much do I owe you? Elias frowned. Oh, me. For your time. The trouble. She pulled out several crisp $100 bills and held them out. Something cold settled in Elias's chest. He stood and took a step back. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, she said, and there was something weary in the way she said it, like she'd learned that lesson 1,000 times over. Not for this, Elias said, his voice firm but not unkind. You needed help. I helped. That's it. Aurora stared at him, the bill still in her hand, and for just a second, something in her face cracked, confusion maybe or disbelief. Then she folded the money and put away. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That was inappropriate. Elias softened. It's been a rough night. Let me drive you home. She gave him an address that made Jonah's eyes go wide when he heard it. The Vale Heights district, where the houses had gates and the driveways had fountains. Elias didn't say anything, just drove her there in silence. When he pulled up to the enormous iron gate, Aurora hesitated before opening the door. Thank you, she said again, and this time it sounded like she meant it in a way that had nothing to do with money. Elias didn't expect to see her again. But 3 days later, she showed up at his garage, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the designer clothes from that night. She looked smaller somehow, more uncertain. I've been thinking, she said, standing awkwardly by the open bay door while Elias wiped grease from his hands. About what happened, about what I did. You don't need to apologize again, Elias said. I'm not, Aurora said. I mean, I am, but that's not why I'm here. She took a breath. I want to do something. The community center on Elm Street, the one that's been closed for 2 years. I'm buying it. Elias blinked. Why? Because this neighborhood needs it, she said simply. Because families like yours deserve a place where kids can go after school, where people can get help when they need it. Because I can and I should. You don't even live here, Elias said, confused. I did once, Aurora said quietly. A long time ago, over the next few months, Aurora kept showing up. She met with contractors, reviewed budgets, and asked Elias for advice on what the community actually needed. At first, he was skeptical. He'd seen plenty of rich people swoop in with big promises and bigger egos, only to disappear when the work got hard. But Aurora didn't disappear. She rolled up her sleeves and helped paint walls. She sat in on neighborhood meetings and listened, really listened, to what people said. Elias found himself looking forward to her visits. She was smart, sharper than anyone he'd ever met, but she didn't use it to make people feel small. She asked questions about his work, about Jonah, about the life he'd built after losing his wife. And slowly, carefully, she started to talk about her own life. The company she'd built from nothing, the loneliness that came with success, the way she'd learned to trust numbers more than people. Then the video went viral. Someone had dash cam footage of the rescue, grainy but unmistakable. Elias pulling Aurora from the car, the landslide crashing down seconds later. Within days, the media found them. Reporters camped outside Elias's garage, calling him a hero. They dug into Aurora's past, painting her as a reclusive billionaire with a heart of ice, using the story to soften her image. Aurora showed up at his house one evening, looking shaken. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never wanted this for you." "It's not your fault," Elias said, leading her inside away from the cameras. She sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She wasn't drinking. "They're not wrong, you know, about me. I spent so long building walls that I forgot what it felt like to let people in." "You're letting people in now," Elias said gently. She looked up at him, eyes bright with something he couldn't name. "You made me want to." The community center opened on a cold Saturday in November. Hundreds of people showed up. Families Elias had known for years, kids who finally had a safe place to go, volunteers ready to help. Aurora stood beside him at the ribbon cutting. And when she spoke, her voice didn't have the corporate polish he'd heard in her interviews. It was just her, honest and raw. "This place isn't named after me," she said. "It's named after every parent who works 2 jobs to keep the lights on, every neighbor who checks in when someone's struggling, every person who believes that community isn't something you buy, it's something you build together." Later, after crowds had gone, Elias found her sitting alone in the new gymnasium, staring at the painted walls. He sat down beside her. "I was a foster kid," Aurora said quietly. "Lived 2 blocks from here when I was 9. The center back then, it was the only place I felt safe. When it closed, I thought maybe that meant places like this didn't matter anymore, that people like me just had to figure out alone." Elias reached over and took her hand. "You're not alone." She looked at him, and he saw the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, scared, brave, and trying so hard to believe she was worth saving. A year later, Aurora asked Elias to help her run the Vail Community Initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting families across the state. He said yes, not because of the salary or the title, but because he believed in what they were building together. Jonah loved her by then, the way kids love people who show up and mean it. On a quiet evening in spring, Aurora and Elias stood in the community center garden, watching Jonah and his friends play basketball. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I used to think I saved you that night," Elias said. Aurora smiled, the kind of smile that reached all the way to the broken places she'd spent years hiding. "Funny," she said. "I was just thinking the same thing about you. Read Triclaw can make mistakes. Please double-check responses."